Hello to you. My name is Marek Kądzielski and you are watching Poland Daily Culture. I have to point an alert at the beginning of this episode because it is not easy to talk about philosophy, and especially about Polish philosophy in front of the camera, and it requires a little bit more of deep thinking and analysis. Today we still talking and mentioning Zdzisław Augustynek, one of the most important professors at Warsaw University in the 20th century. And with me in the studio is Marek Kądzielski, one of his former students.
Hello, everyone.
And I would like just to draw a map of philosophical schools and statements, especially when it comes to analytical philosophy, and where we should point and put Zdzisław Augustynek in all of this.
So Augustynek should be put in the same stream as, for instance, Bertrand Russell. So this is analytical school in its naturalistic stream. An analytical school can be characterized by using logic and logical analysis and mathematics in philosophical investigations. Well, Augustynek was pupil of Professor Melberg, who is another important figure in Polish philosophy. As I mentioned, Augustynek was deeply interested in philosophy of space and physics, when he contributed a lot to the development of this discipline. What is interesting that in Poland, philosophy of science was pursued mainly by representatives of the church, and we had two of them, Professor Heller, who was a priest, who knew Augustynek papers and who admired them, who considered them as a good analytical work on the grounds of philosophy of science. And we had Józef Rzeciński, who was a Grand Bishop of the church and who was also interested very strongly and in a very professional way, it must be admitted, in philosophy of science. So
maybe a deeper relation to God just simply leads you to cosmology.
This is interesting that church perceives contemporary philosophy, contemporary physics as something important in a culture, something that has influence on a doctrine, something you have to cope with and something you cannot ignore. While contemporary philosophy not necessarily considers philosophy of science as its mainstream. But still, Augustynek was considering those characteristics of space and time. What is interesting, he found that Immanuel Kant was the philosopher who already declared that time has all the same features as a line in mathematics. And this is very deep because this involves that time has on one hand some topological characteristics and on the other hand some metric characteristics. What is important and what is worthwhile considering, that even if we accept certain ontologies and solutions which are feasible on the ground of physics, we still don't decide upon everything. I mean, we cannot understand properly everything. On one hand, because if we are analyzing the development of physical world from the Big Bang until the present moment, we can see that after the Big Bang, if we assume that there was a Big Bang from which the physical universe started, there is a time called Planck's time, after which our equations that describe world has some physical meaning. But before this time, which is very short but definite, all our equations either equal zero or go to infinity, which means that they bring no information about physical status of the world. So we know nothing about this.
About the first few seconds.
Yes, about the first few moments, let's say, of the development of physical world. And coming back to the concept of time, it's a question whether time is infinite with no ends, or it had some beginning, this implies many other problems
also
on the grounds
beginning of the material, yes.
Yes, so in one of the theories, time had no beginning. I mean, it started off together with the Big Bang. This produces another problems on the grounds of causal relation, as I mentioned, because we cannot explain everything. It seems to be some relation between our understanding of the world, in philosophical terms, some relation between epistemology and ontology, which are interrelated. Augustynek was not very fond of this. I remember when I was preparing a thesis about Kant's theory of time, and I had to apply some topological analysis and metrical analysis to this. I did a lot more because I found some explanations to what was considered by St. Augustine. So I found on the ground of biology and medicine that how our mind construes image of reality is that what we perceive as now is actually 0.3 seconds of time that is not definitely a cross-section of space-time continuum. So we perceive the world already in a different way. We have some concept of now which has a dimension, which is contrary to analytical analysis of concept of space-time physics, of space and time continuum.
Definitely, everything what we see is already a little bit of the past because light needs to get to our eyes, and it takes time, of course, very short time, but still time.
Yes, so this is another issue, that everything we observe is somehow in the past.
And how to look in the past is just to look to the stars.
On the other hand, on the grounds of theory elaborated by Augustynek, he claimed that it is not so that what is in the past already does not exist and what is in the future is not existing yet. It simply exists in other part of space-time continuum. Well, this is important. We may say that as we exist here and now in the studio, it does not imply that there is nothing in the next studio. So in this way...
Or in the other possible world, where we, for example,
it's not about
right
possible
now
words.
About cooking.
It's not about possible words, honestly speaking. But it says that if anything has ever existed in a physical world, it's still there, but simply in other parts of space-time continuum.
Yes, it's a famous, and what all students of philosophy need, a worm of time, which has different dimensions and different parts of it. And of course, it's very interesting, but it's a discussion which takes us back to a class at the university. And I hope everyone who is interested in doing something like this will basically just attend a philosophical lecture. But what is worth mentioning that Zdzisław Augustynek was also a thinker going to the ontology and not only staying in language, for example, or analyzing, as many analytic philosophers tend to do and like to do, just avoiding ontology at all. And of course, he was not doing it. He was treating ontology very seriously. And that's something very important also for him. Not only worth mentioning his point eventism and ontologies and papers which he wrote. So, Marek, thank you very much for having this discussion, and I hope we will analyze and talk about other Polish philosophers in other episodes and maybe again in time. And I hope also it encourage other people more to analyze it and like it and know it. And to all of you, thank you for being with us, and we send you to read more about Zdzisław Augustynek. Thank you for watching Poland Daily Culture.